Take a girl and a guy, and they fall madly in love and form a family. Sprinkle in some counseling degrees and a doctorate, a dream of transforming relationships as we know it. And 20 years later, we give you power couple Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. And this is their podcast, Couples Synergy.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean. Hi, I am Dr. Ray.
And I'm Jean. And this is our podcast about love, marriage, and relationships.
Please check us out online at couplesynergy.com or on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Couple Synergy. And please subscribe to our podcast, leave us a review, or send us any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear more about. Keep in mind that this podcast, like today, is broadcasted live every Monday at 6 p.m. Central Time on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So join our discussion with questions or just stop by to say hi. And now on to Couple Synergy, an in-depth look at love, marriage, and relationships, where we bring you our experience helping thousands of couples transform their relationships for over 25 years.
You know, everyone says you should work on your relationship, but nobody teaches us how. So we've created this podcast to teach people they can do to create the relationship they've always dreamed of
with the partner they fell in love with. On today's episode, we're talking about the pace of a human being.
Yeah.
And before we do that, before we get into that discussion of the pace of a human being, I just wanted to read off a couple reviews that a couple people have put on our podcast. I think it was on Apple Podcasts. Yeah, on Apple Podcasts. So one of them was a guest on our podcast, and it was Liz Polinsky. She said, grateful to be a guest. I got to be a guest on episode 274 to talk about military relationships. I'm grateful to the host for allowing me to be a guest and for also including topics related to military and veteran couples on their podcast. Given the shortage of mental health professionals in America and the need for more mental health counselors to become trained in couples work and military related concerns, I'm so glad podcasts like this exist to help support couples looking to improve their relationships. Thanks, Liz. It was a really great discussion. If you guys out there want to listen to that episode, it's episode 274. Another review is also No Topic Off Limits. This is from PR Girl 47. No Topic Off Limits, refreshing and real conversations, lessons in every episode. Thank you so much for that. That was a really great review.
You know, before we get into this topic, what we do in working with relationships is so incredibly awesome and so incredibly terrible. Because do you know what it's like to try to market? And the words we have to sell stuff, I mean, there's so many things they make it seem like, oh, this is so incredible. Just so you buy it, and you buy it and it's garbage. And it's so difficult for us to be able to share our wealth of knowledge with people and have them believe us, because there's so much lying, which is part of this topic of the pace of a human being.
So much misinformation. You don't really know what you can believe anymore these days. And some of you might be wondering why I'm wearing this Hunter orange cap here is because I literally came off of the mountain about an hour ago, and because hunting season started, and that's why this topic kind of came to mind, because you know I actually have not been staying up on the mountain this year. Last year I did that, but
we did for first season when I was
first season we did do that, right? But this time for second season, I'm kind of going back and forth, you know, and it's really quite an adjustment. You know, you're out there for hours, and the nature is just surrounding you. You are like in nature, literally in it, and there's just nothing to do. but to just be
And listen.
and listen, right? And observe, and just every little nuance, every little movement, every little sound, just a drop of, water coming off of a branch and hitting the ground. You are so attuned to all of it, which is not something that happens in normal society. In normal society, you're actually bombarded
Mm-hmm.
to the point that you are kind of overwhelmed. I think completely overwhelmed to the point you kind of shut down and turn off.
Yeah. And get anxiety and
Yeah,
depression.
you get
and-
fried.
Yeah.
You get fried.
Mhm. Yep.
And it is just such an important concept that not many people are able to experience. The pace of a human being.
Right. And the pace of a human being, if you think about that, it's how fast can you walk? How far can you see? How quickly can you observe something? Interesting thing that happens in nature a lot is if you're with another person and they say, "Oh, look at that." And you go to look and you didn't see it.
Mm.
And it's so interesting how nature will show itself or not show itself. And if you are interacting with something in nature, it's for sure because nature wants to interact with you.
And the elk have not been showing themselves. That's for sure.
Not in many years.
So
So
frustrating.
one thing that's interesting is a neighbor of ours, he also came down off the mountain today. And the first thing he said is, I'm grateful to be home and healthy. And, because it things can happen out in nature. You can slip, you can fall, you can lots of
I
things.
fell a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be instantaneous where your life takes a big turn really quick.
For sure.
And, if you think about being out in nature, maybe you're in the garden and your partner says to you, "Hey, come check this out." And you put your tools down, you take your gloves off, and you walk away and you go and look at whatever they're showing you. When you come back, your gloves didn't move. And your flowers are still there, whatever you were doing, it's all still there. But if you're watching TV or whatever screen you're on, and you'll notice this on social media, it instantly changes your screen and you can never get it back. If you see something on there and you click it and it resets and then you can't find it.
Yeah, because the algorithms are
Yep.
already changing.
And that anxiety that gets produced because if you're watching a screen and someone says, "Hey, come here, let me show you this." When you get back, that screen's long, long gone.
Yeah.
And that's that FOMO, fear of missing out. And they want you to start looking for it again and trying to connect and trying to be part of something. And it just creates a bunch of anxiety for us. And it's not real. Like if you never see that thing again, you're not going to die. You're not going to starve to death. You're not going to fall off a cliff. Not going to be chased by a bear, and so we have all this unnatural anxiety and unnatural interactions with the world.
What's interesting is that fear of missing out. It also exists at the, when you're hunting, because, you'll be sitting there and you will be, kind of watching where you're at and everything. And then you'll hear a shot like
In the distance.
miles away in the distance.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I'm missing out. Like, oh,
Why not me?
yeah. Like maybe I should be over there or something, and I think it's like an instinctual thing, right?
For sure.
Because
Mhm.
of natural resources, right? Wanting to get those resources. And if someone else gets those resources, then you feel like you're missing out, right? And so what happens is that in our contrived society with social media, they really they kind of capitalize on that instinctual, that instinct in us.
Right. The whole field of psychology created the algorithms of the platforms to keep us feeling a certain way
Right.
so that we really want to be part of that.
Yeah. And then we want to get want to get likes, and, it's like, oh, this person's got a lot of likes, and, am I missing out on something, in not following them or listening to what they're saying? And so it is something that really competes with a marriage and with a committed partnership. Because if you are constantly being pulled in multiple directions and by multiple things, then you are not moving at the pace of a human being in a relationship.
I remember that feeling in our relationship.
Yeah.
And I used to say to you, I wish I was an email, because then you would want to open it up and see what was happening.
Then you did send me emails.
I'd be sitting right next to you.
Yeah.
And you would be 3 screens deep. Remember, I used to say that you'd have your phone, your laptop, and the TV.
And the TV on.
And it was so habitual. We were very asleep back then. And I would just sit there and be kind of lonely. And you'd be all 3 screens deep. And yeah, I would text you or send you an email or something and be like, hi, I'm right here.
Well, I mean, that's the stark contrast of living out here, in this kind of rural area, and even the experience of going into nature, whether we're hiking, whether we're camping, whether we're hunting. You're totally unplugged, and you are totally immersed in what life is supposed to be.
Well, interestingly, while you're on your adventure, I went to the local coffee shop with a neighbor, and she saw this guy, and he had a trailer full of firewood. And so he comes in, and we ask him, where'd you get the firewood? And he's like, oh, this guy over here, he's selling it. And I said, well, we're looking for some. Could you give me his number? And he leaves. He puts his stuff down on the table with us, not his phone, something else. And he leaves. We see him outside on the phone, and he's calling the guy probably to get permission to give us his number, and comes back in, and he's like, do you mind if I join you? And sits down and has his breakfast with us. His name was Ray. He was a nice guy. And then like 10 minutes later, the guy that he called, his name is Saw, because only in Colorado.
Anyone Saw is selling firewood.
He walks in the door to introduce himself.
Literally his real name was Saw.
No, I think it's a nickname, because he was telling us a story about how him and his son and his grandson and his great-grandson did something on this hill for the guy that used to own it. So he knew where we lived. He knows a lot of people that we kind of know. And I mean, he's 80 something years old. And today he drove up 2 cords of wood. I don't know if you guys know how big that is, but if it's 4 foot by 4 foot, I think that's a half a cord.
So a regular pickup truck, if you fill
the bed
up,
yeah,
it's 3/4 of a cord.
Well,
it's not a full cord.
He had slats going up higher.
Yeah. So if the slats are up and you fill up to the top, that's a cord.
He brought me 2 of those. Oh. And this man at 80 years old is climbing in and out of the back of a pickup truck and delivering wood after he just loaded it up. But that's the thing, is like, I met this man 3 days ago, whatever it is, 2 days ago. And he's now been here at our house and he came over to say hello.
Met him in a natural way, because I have been trying to get firewood for the past 2 months through Facebook Marketplace, and these people are not dependable. They're not like showing up.
Yeah.
They're not committing anything. So, it's like you meet someone local and you strike up a conversation in like a normal pace of a human being.
Well, right. Interestingly, later that day, I sent him a text. And our neighbor's like, I think he's the kind of guy that you need to call. I don't think
He texts.
but he called and
Uh-huh.
we talked on the phone that night.
Uh-huh.
And then he called last night and I called him back this morning. Like out here, people talk to each other.
Right.
They don't like, you don't just text. And if you see someone, you stop and you say hello everywhere. And if you don't know people, they introduce themselves to you. And it's a really nice feeling of that. It's not that feeling that you feel when you just are in a room with a bunch of people that walk past you.
I actually saw an article where it said that texting is more polite now when you are starting up a conversation with someone new than to call them.
I would agree that that's how they feel.
Yeah.
Because it takes more effort to call and to actually have a conversation. So it's like permission. And I noticed that too with us. Like we text people and say, would you like to have a phone call later? And we schedule it, whether it's our kids or our friends or a Zoom chat, you know, like you can't just ring them up a Zoom chat. They have to be prepared. Or I'm going to call you at this time. Will you be around and available? So there's not an interruption of your life, but everyone's so busy out here. Oh, people drop by your house out here. Just stop by.
And out here, you call people.
Oh yeah.
You don't text them.
No.
You actually call them. And it's again the pace of a human being.
And it's so much better for your mental wellness.
Right.
And your emotional health. And there's just not the drive out here for things. You know, like there's a good chance you could go down and try to go for dinner somewhere and the restaurant's not open that night.
Right.
It happens pretty regularly. But then there's another one that is, and you just kind of adapt to that. And there's so much more things you have to tolerate here. You have to tolerate, first of all, altitude itself is something you tolerate. There's less oxygen up here. But you have to tolerate how long things take.
And you have to have patience.
Yep.
You know, you just have to let go of trying to get 15 things done within a time frame because it's just not going to happen. And you just need to go about something and try. And if it happens, it happens. Like, you know, we took the trailer up for first season hunting and we had a flat tire and the spare for the trailer, and the spare for the trailer was here at the house, which is an hour and a half away from where we were at. And so we had to come back, we had to get the tire, and then we had to go back and put the tire on, and then that tire didn't work.
Right.
That tire got flat. So then we had to take the tire back, and I had to take it to the shop to go get fixed, and then to take it back. I mean, this is
many things take all day to do.
It really does. It really does.
I remember reading an article and it talked about like the time when I was a kid. You too, also, I think. You would have these boxes of cereal with box tops. Remember the box tops?
Oh, yeah.
And then it would say, save 3 of these box tops and then send in a self-addressed stamped envelope with $1.50 and you're going to get some toy or something. And you would have to wait 3 boxes worth of cereal that you had to eat.
You'd eat several bowls to get through it.
And then you had to mail it, and then you had to wait for the mail. And this whole process might take 6 weeks, 2 months. And now we had, and this was just, I think, when the fax machine was coming out, that people would stand by the fax machine and their anxiety would be through the roof because they wanted it and they wanted it now. You know, they're waiting for it. They want it now. The same thing with email or whatever we're doing. Is like, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And all of that really stops you from being in this moment. And I remember the first time we weren't hunting, we were scouting. And it's so different than hiking. Because when you hike, you're walking through nature. But when you're hunting, you have to pay attention. You're looking, you're listening, and everything is, you're just so present. It's such a spiritual experience. I was so surprised by how spiritual that experience was going to be, of just being so present. And think about the last time you just gazed into your partner's eyes. for longer than a second or two.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when we're working with a couple, we ask them to look at each other like we never look at each other. Well, you did when you first met. It's a bonding behavior. And then as time goes on, we stop doing that and it becomes awkward and uncomfortable. And we stop hearing our partner. We stop even listening to ourselves. And, like my thing I always like to say is women don't pee when they have to pee. They don't even listen to their body having to literally go to the bathroom. And it's so not good for us.
Hmm.
So we would really encourage you to spend some electronic free time to look at your partner.
Preferably get out in nature.
Yeah. Even though winter is knocking on the door. But still, it's lovely to be. You sat in 2 feet of snow this weekend.
Yeah. For hours.
I
Like
sat
4
here
to 5
watching it
hours.
snow.
I watched it snow on me. I had to every 5 minutes or so, I had to knock the snow off of my head because it was just piling up on my shoulders and my head.
I always notice that with the animals that are out there. There's just a ton of animals here, whether they're cows or horses or llamas or sheep or wild animals.
Wow.
And they just stand there and take it. And they just stand in the snow and it snows on them. And you were part of that, and we try to shelter ourselves from so many of those things. But I remember, I love that feeling. And the only time I really had it when we lived in Illinois was shoveling at night. And you'd sit there and you'd listen to the snowfall and maybe just be till your neighbor fires up their snowblower and ruins it all. But just that sound of insulated silence.
I was laughing because it's been years since I've heard that sound.
Yeah, we don't even own a snowblower.
Right, because you can't.
You couldn't even find the sticks for the brushing off the car, so you used a leaf blower. That was hilarious.
Well, it worked.
Yeah, we don't need those kind of things anymore.
No. So, and we're talking about living at the pace of a human being from our own personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we both were born and bred in the Chicagoland area and lived the majority of our lives there and have
Mm-hmm.
really only been out here in Western Colorado for the past 2 years.
Right.
So
we did start hiking 7 years ago.
We did, yes. So we have had that
Yeah.
experience of hiking for long periods of time and backpacking and being out in nature like that. But living in it all the time, 24/7 with everything that goes with it, that is a new experience for us. And so, this is really, we always say we can't teach it if we don't live it. And we are truly living it and trying to pass along our experience, onto you. Really, we encourage all of you guys, if you live in a city, get out in nature.
7 days. It takes 7 days being in nature to reset your circadian rhythm. Is that what it's called?
Sure.
We were designed to wake up with the sun, go to bed with the sun. And if you've ever slept in a tent and you start to feel the warmth of the sun after the cold night, and you start to hear the sounds of the birds and you start to see light, and it naturally wakes you up in a very lovely way. And we're night people. We don't really go to bed till very late, and we usually sleep in pretty late. And in nature, we don't do that. And at 8 o'clock at night, you are in your tent, in your sleeping bag. It's cold.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go to bed before sundown when we hike, and we get up before around sunrise. And it just feels really great. It just feels great. It's not that hard. And you'd be surprised at going out in nature is not the shock. It's coming back.
It sure is. Well, we want to thank you for joining us today on Couple Synergy. and the topic of moving and living at the pace of a human being. Our passion is in helping couples and people have happy and healthy relationships, and this podcast gives us a fun way of bringing our knowledge and expertise to you, our listeners. For all of you listening, please let us know how you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions, comments, or topic suggestions, please email us at contact@couplesynergy.com. For more information about Couple Synergy and our programs such as Relationship 101, the home study course, which you can purchase and do the home study course at home, the next couples relationship enhancement weekend, and our premier couples coaching program called Couple to Couple. Look us up online at couplesynergy.com.
And if you know someone who could benefit from this episode, please download it and share it. And thank you for listening.
I just noticed that a lot of our exit or outro is a lot of alliteration. The couples.
And I was gonna say,
to
you know,
couple.
if you have kids that are anxious, depressed, get them out in nature, and they're gonna fight you for about the first hour, 2 hours, and then they're gonna just transform completely in front of you. We see it with kids come out and visit us, and it's really an amazing thing and worth the effort.
Until next time, synergize your life and synergize your love.
You have been listening to Couple Synergy with Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Couple Synergy was recorded, edited, and produced by Dr. Ray and Jean Ketkodian. Voiceover and music entitled Breathe and Let Go was recorded and composed by Gina Gonzalez.